Welcome to the Imperial Investment Insights Podcast. My name is Ronnie, bit of a unexpected host today after Sanjay's unavailable and Jamila's out with a sore throat. It's that time of year again. And today we're delighted to welcome Marc Kitten, a visiting Imperial professor and co-founder of Candesic, a life sciences consulting firm. Welcome to the show, Marc.
Thank you, Ronnie. Pleasure to be with you. Sorry about Jamila.
Just to start off, wanted to talk about your education, where you grew up, and if you're always interested in business and finance or life sciences.
Yes, I grew up in France, although I traveled across Europe quickly once I was a teenager. I had an education in France. Business was not a vocation when I was 2 or 3 years old, but by 5, 6, yes, it was clear. And I went to business school to study mostly finance there, and that's how it started. But I always had an interest, not specifically in healthcare, frankly, but in technologies in general.
Great. I noticed that you were working for Deutsche Bank in the 90s, and we just wanted to touch upon it quickly. How did you find that experience, and what did you learn, and did that really impact your career afterwards?
It's a mixed bag, to be totally open. I mean, it goes back quite a few years. I joined Deutsche Bank because I was attracted by the technology, very attracted by the technology of the markets. And the first years were quite exciting. It was exposed to the best technologies in the world, on par with what Goldman Sachs was doing in the US, perhaps, and was working in derivatives. I liked that at the beginning. Now, after a while, I lost a lot of my interest because I thought there were probably 3 things why I was less motivated. One, there was not much renewal. Once you understand how those derivative products function, all you can do is wait for the next one to come, but that's not a revolution every week. The second thing is what I was doing was very short term, and I was more interested in the strategic side of things, which I didn't have in the markets. And the third reason was I realized that I was not made for very large organizations, and Deutsche Bank had, 80,000 employees maybe. It's easy to feel a bit lost in such a large organization. So what was exciting at the beginning, interestingly, became an issue after a few years. That's why I changed career.
Wow.
Partially.
Was there like a specific point in time where you realized that this wasn't for you, or was it more of like a gradual process?
Yeah, I mean, there were certainly different points in time, and I'm not sure they would be representative. One of my best friends went to Harvard to do his MBA, and that's, I started raising my curiosity about going back to school. So I went to Chicago Booth to focus more on the finance side, which is what I had chosen. And he went to McKinsey, so I got interested in that too. So I went to McKinsey. Wow. He left the day I got my offer. But that's how things happened, right? This interest that I developed came late because I did not know much about strategy and strategy consulting, in spite of having studied management, interestingly, and discovered it later in life while I was doing pure finance.
That sounds really interesting, and it seems like you've moved around the globe quite a lot with your work and studies. I just wanted to quickly touch on your time at Chicago. 2 of my best mates actually are studying there right now, and I just wanted to know how you find that compared to being in Europe.
It's not the place that is important. I think it's the curriculum and the professors. And I went also to INSEAD for a short, kind of a compressed MBA program. I found that the quality of the professors was very high there, and I found that the quality of the professor at Chicago Booth was even higher. Now, it was not the same time, and I'm not comparing them, they are both top institutions, but I think I was exposed more and more to the way of teaching of American professors, And I realized that in the US, because it's a very large market, extremely competitive, I believe that management, or professor in business at least, must be the best, both in their discipline, but also in their ability to teach, right? Not just research, also teach. In Europe, unfortunately, the focus has been historically more on the research only. And teaching is often a byproduct, and I've seen some professors, they just don't want to teach. They have absolutely no interest in that. So the American model that I saw at Harvard indirectly and at Chicago Booth was a bit different from that perspective, with young professors who were absolutely brilliant. I had 3 Nobel Prizes teaching.
Wow.
Over time. But there were lots of very brilliant people who were not just brilliant, they were motivated. And that was a big, big change. And that's why I became myself a professor, at least a visiting professor.
Wow, that is very inspiring. I'm just going to go off topic with a more fun question. So what city out of all the ones you've been to is your favorite?
Well, I like the world, so it's very difficult. I've been super excited by many cities in the world. Now, if you wanted to pick one, maybe I would say Barcelona, which I find super exciting, mixing all sorts of cultures. But I am a big fan of Hong Kong and Shanghai, for example. I really like smaller cities like Kochi in India, or I don't know, I mean, there are so many. Marrakesh is fascinating. I can pick them all over the world, right? I mean, New York, of course, I should mention New York. New York is an absolutely fascinating city where I've had a lot of pleasure to stay. Chicago is fascinating, but it's a bit far away, so it's not at the top of my list because of the location. I prefer the location of New York, because personally I have more reasons to be there. But yeah, there are so many fascinating cities, and I was actually yesterday at a presentation by EDEC Business School on the future of cities, which is quite fascinating.
That is quite an interesting topic. Where would you say London fits in all of these cities to you?
Yeah, I did not mention London simply because I've been living here for 25 years, so it's really home, but it remains definitely a world city. I have actually, at Imperial College, I presented London as a financial center to one of the big Chinese business schools a few years ago. And I was explaining what lots of people know, of course, but that London has all the infrastructure that is necessary. And that includes the talents. It's one of 6 or 7 different resources that you need to have together. And perhaps only 2 cities in the world have that so far, London and New York. And the most important resource is talent, and the talent is not just to have clever people, but to have trained people in all disciplines that you need. So, for example, in London, you can find an expert in Uzbek law, probably, if you need that. You can find an expert in Italian medtech, and in Mexican regulation, in social care. So all these profiles, they exist there. They are attracted by the city, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Talent attracts talent. Talents attract recruiters. Recruiters attract talents. The role of an institution like Imperial College is extremely important in that. It's fascinating, you were talking about London, it's fascinating that London has 2 of the top 10 or 15 universities in the world in many ways to recognize it, between Imperial and UCL. And I would say in the suburbs of London, there are Oxford and Cambridge. So I would count that as an extended London, okay? I mean, at the scale of China, for example, Oxford and Cambridge would be the suburb, definitely. So we could extend it to 4 institutions around London out of the top 12 or 15 institutions in the world. This is incredibly concentrated.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the Oxford students will will take you saying that it's a London suburb, but I'm glad that we're a good city to be in. So I just wanted to quickly move over to your time at Candesic. So we're just really curious about having worked at both McKinsey and Deutsche, which are all really big names in their own respective industries. What led you to start your own firm, and what did you think you could do differently?
I mean, if I were to do things differently, I would be an orchestra conductor, so an architect, so that would be something different, or an actor, or something else. So we won't open that door. As I mentioned earlier, I discovered after a few years at Deutsche Bank that it was too big an institution for me. I suppose if I had been the CEO of the bank, I would not have felt for that, but nobody offered me the job, so I developed that feeling that I was not in the right place. Joining McKinsey was a dream because I was following perhaps the steps of a few people that I admired, and it was a joy because they taught me to think, or they taught me to be born again in terms of thinking. And that was an amazing intellectual experience. It's all extremely simple. It's very, very basic rules that go back to the Greeks, but that have been adapted to the business environment in the best possible way. No one has done it that as well as McKinsey did. And that was a very rewarding intellectual and mental experience. So I was trained to think better in a more pragmatic and business-like way. In spite of having been 10 years in banking, I had not learned much of that. Actually, I had to unlearn a lot.
Wow.
So it was really a transformative experience, really. And I recommend it to anyone who is curious. And I found the world of strategy consulting way richer than the world of investment banking and financial markets, even if I'm intellectually interested in the financial markets, but there are limits to it. McKinsey is a large firm, was already to an extent a large firm when I joined it, but that was 20 plus years, 25 years ago. And I think we were 10,000 at the time, which is large, but felt somehow much less large than the big bank where I was before. Plus, I was within a practice. I was associated with a group of people who worked in a particular sector, etc. So there was a sense of belonging to a family that was across the world, but that was a few hundred people, not 10,000. So I felt way more at ease in that environment. Again, that's very special. I have seen lots of people who are absolutely fine being one of 1 million in an organization. Look at the Big Four, right? They have up to 1 million employees around the world. No, for me, the McKinsey experience was great from those two perspectives. But first, for the rewiring of the brain, that taught me to teach, actually, because I left McKinsey partially because I wanted to teach. Wow. And funding or co-funding my own company was also the opportunity to have more freedom and to think that I would never have been able to do as an employee anywhere, which is to allocate substantial part of my life to developing an academic experience, especially in teaching. But not only, I want to write.
Right. So I just wanted to quickly talk about Candesic as a company, as Imperial students and as mostly STEM students as a population. I feel like a lot of us are almost a bit scared of like exploring finance or consulting roles because we're not really sure what it entails. So I was just wondering if you could introduce Candesic really simply to someone who knows absolutely nothing about consulting. What would you say?
Yes, I'm so glad you invited me because I think I can really share something useful here. Okay, regarding Candesic, we just wanted to create our own consulting firm. We thought that there was no offer in the world, as far as we knew, for the mid-market that would cover all verticals of healthcare, meaning not just healthcare services, but also medtech, health tech, pharma and biotech, life sciences in general, we thought all that is related, and no one was looking at everything. Either you had the big firms like McKinsey that would have a practice for pharma companies, another one for hospitals, another one for insurance companies that did not do much together, or you had boutique firms that would be specialists of orthopedic surgery or of social care in Spain. We wanted to cover everything related to health. That's what we have created, and I'm really, really happy to say that we have succeeded. It's been 23 years now, and we are a small company. We are 40 people, but we punch above our weight. We have a real world reach. We have offices in London and New York and people across Europe. We work globally. We are, I think, recognized. We just this year, we got all 3 awards from Real Deals, which is a German private equity one, from Health Investor, and from Lang Buisson, which is specialized in healthcare. So we got all 3. If you think about the odds, they are incredibly low. If you consider there are probably 8 to 10 contestants in each of those. So remember your math formulas for combinations, calculate the chance that we would have all 3 in the same year. And my colleague, Dr. Michel Tempest, just got recognized as one of the top 50 leaders in healthcare. So all that in the same year, that's really a pleasure to see that it's working. The business model that we invented is working. And we never had the ambition to create a company with 10 or 100,000 employees. Of course, we would prefer to be 50 than 40 or 150, but the difference is not that big. So that's what Candesic is about. We advise CEOs, C-level people in all areas of healthcare on their strategy, and we advise investors, like private equity investors, who want to invest or divest their healthcare assets. That's really what we do.
Congratulations on the awards, by the way.
Thank you. But your question had a second more important component, which is the link to the students. When you are a STEM student, it's fantastic. Okay, my children are both STEM students from Imperial in Oxford.
Great.
And they learn things that they will be able to use all their life. So you're doing the right thing. Business you can learn anytime in your life. It's much more difficult to become an engineer at 50 than it is to become a businessman at 80, right?
Yeah.
So business you can learn anytime. Within business, one area is more technical, it's finance. But if you study STEM, you are technical already. And frankly, finance is not rocket science. There are some areas of complexity in economics, but still it doesn't go as far as what you would find in what my daughter studies in quantum chemistry, for example. Wow. So don't worry. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you should be complacent or arrogant. The fact that you have done fluid physics will make it very easy for you to understand the complex areas of finance or derivatives. But that doesn't mean that you will get it within the first 24 hours. Like every technology or every technique and every science, you need time. You need regular, constant, repeated exposure until it becomes your language. But the language of finance, you can learn relatively fast.
So would you say it's the ability to take on really complicated topics that makes STEM students unique?
Yes and no. Unless you go into a very specialized area of consulting that has an element of research, for example, you are not going to use a lot of the most complex tools that you have studied, but shouldn't be a big problem. It doesn't matter. It has formed your brain, and you will have a good brain to structure thoughts. In the age of AI, that is going to become even more important. When you prompt, you are not doing something very different than problem solving. That's what I try to explain to my consultants. Prompting is another way of structuring thoughts in problem solving. So creating a framework, trying to figure out what are the key problems to solve and how they decompose into issues and sub-issues is a bit the same thought process. Of course, there are new elements. How do you deal with hallucination? There's an element of psychology that did not exist before in problem solving. Now you need to exercise reverse psychology with an intelligent artifice or an artificial intelligence. And that is an additional skill to develop. But who knows, maybe you will buy tools that will be trained at that psychology for you and you won't need to do it yourself. So what you learn in most areas, if not all areas of STEM, is to think the right way, to be ready to learn how to develop your thinking further, and you are in a good position. At Candesic, we hire mostly people from STEM. Now, first medical, right? Lots of medical doctors, but we love biochemical engineers, biomedical engineers. We have PhDs in all sorts of sciences, preferably close to medicine. But we've had people coming from physics, from chemistry, who have done very, very well. We still recruit some of my students in finance at Imperial, but the majority of our staff, at the moment probably 2/3 and ultimately maybe 80% is STEM. And they learn very fast.
On the healthcare topic, I just wanted to quickly go back to something we touched upon earlier. I just wanted to clarify, when you founded Candesic, was it the fact that you wanted your own consulting firm the first thing, and then healthcare was the topic or like the industry that you figured out afterwards, or did you go into it knowing that there was this gap in the market and that the healthcare consulting firm was exactly what you wanted to work on?
It's difficult to give an honest answer because I don't even know myself, but I would venture that the first reason is to have your firm, right? It's really exciting, the idea that when you launch a startup, to think it's my firm. It's not about my firm, it belongs to me. It's the place where I can freely act and decide where it goes. That's more that. So it's an adventure. It's very exciting. So I would say that was probably the first motivation, with the accompanying element of freedom to do other things on the side, like teaching. The second one, which is still very important, is the topic. But here there was a mix of two things, to be honest. There was an attraction for technologies in general that I shared with my other founder, Dr. Leonid Shapiro, ex-McKinsey colleague. So we were both fascinated by all areas of technology, including consumer technologies. But because he's a medical doctor, it made more sense to focus on healthcare. Although we did try all sorts of technologies, we have worked pretty much everywhere in satellite, in all sorts of things. But very quickly, healthcare became natural. Okay, so maybe the world decided for us in a sense. We did healthcare from the very beginning, of course, but it became dominant, and we survived the great financial crisis, or the global financial crisis, as we should name it, thanks to healthcare.
Wow.
Because we had very quickly developed an activity serving private equity for commercial due diligence, and we're very successful. The model had been invented, to be honest, by Bain, right? So we were not the first ones, but we were those who wanted to develop it in healthcare. And we were successful, not just in healthcare, but in other sectors. And then came the global financial crisis. And guess what? The market was divided not by 2 or 3, but by 10. The number of, I don't remember the value or the number of deals, but it was divided by 10. And it was a bloodbath. Pretty much all the small and medium players in our field were acquired. They had to sell themselves to Big Four or to other companies. We survived and did well shortly after because we were in healthcare. So we put all our efforts in healthcare at the time. All right. So was it a strategic choice? Yes, but also one that had been forced upon us by the events. If there had not been a global financial crisis, perhaps we would still be doing a lot of telecom or satellite work.
Right. That's such an interesting point, and it kind of just leads me to wonder how Candesic approached COVID. And I feel like the last 10 years has been a lot of uncertainty. And I just wanted to know if you felt like you were more well prepped to handle those situations because of your experience in '08.
Oh, what I know from having taught is that crises always achieve to surprise us, right? So we say history doesn't repeat itself, or we say history repeats itself. The truth is, history finds a way to repeat in a different way each time and surprise us. So it will surprise us in being different in the way it impacts us, or coming at a time we don't expect it, or in a combination that we never thought about. Unless perhaps a few people who will become very rich, but you could probably think they were lucky. So yes, we have learned from the global financial crisis, we have learned from COVID, we have learned from a few other difficult environment. That I wouldn't say that makes us a much better organization, but certainly that makes us a bit more resilient as managers, right? So
Right.
we are more likely, I hope, to make the right decision faster without wasting too much time and energy if we face a new crisis, even if it is a new one.
Right.
It's not a guarantee that we will survive it in every case, but I think we are made more resilient. Plus, after 23 years, we remain a relatively agile organization. I mean, it's easier to do when you are 40 than when you are 40,000, of course, but we can decide, if needed, to change lots of things very fast. Okay. So what did we learn from COVID? I think we learned more at the individual level than at the organizational level. It was an extremely disruptive time. It was a tough time. I mean, some of the people who are going to listen to that may remember there were good things, actually, with COVID. I mean, not that much. I mean, it was terrible killing all people. But there was one good thing, is that suddenly, for the first time in our modern lives, we saw cities with no cars and only the noise of the birds. That was magic. Of course, at what price? Just to say that there was not only bad stuff, right?
Right.
Now, on the bad side, that was extremely tough for the young people like you, especially. Remember, that was before Brexit. Right, that was before the Brexit was fully consumed, let's say. And we had lots of people from all over the world, especially from Europe, who had come to study at Imperial College, for example, much more at the time than now. And they would work with us, be on a working visa for 2 years that would be transformed very easily into a definitive visa. And so it was relatively a no-brainer. But those young people who came to London to study and work with us, they suddenly felt themselves alone in the world, living in some cheap basement in the suburb of London and mentally suffering, etc. And that coincided with the craziest time ever in M&A. We had the biggest activity ever in history in M&A, including in private equity.
Wow.
We were busier than ever. It was super difficult to respond to the demand. But that's not the problem. The problem was that it was in the context of people learning to work from home, so a bit disruptive, and lots of people having mental issues, which was way more disruptive. And then a layer of competition. So basically, Candesic is known to be one of the best companies to train people, I think, in the world, but at the level of a very small company like us, of course. Okay, but people in our field, they know that we train our people extremely well. So everyone came to serve themselves. Okay, so rather than train people themselves, all those teams from the Big Four and from everywhere came to poach our people, just offering to double their remuneration.
Wow.
And when you're a young person living in a basement, far away from your family, not being allowed to wander around, etc., a bit depressed and stressed, and someone comes and say, "You are the best in the world. I want to give you lots of money to work for me because I believe you are a genius." well, you feel like a genius and you just go there.
Right.
And everyone was poaching from everyone, except us. And I found that a bit disgusting that time, from a perspective. So on one hand, we were working like crazy, with lots of very interesting work, managing difficult logistics. On the other hand, we were constantly fighting to try to retain or replace our talents that was constantly poached by competitors who should rather develop an ability to train people themselves. I may sound a little bit annoyed, but I just tell you it was just unhealthy, this way of just the bigger one will just buy the talent of the smaller one everywhere. But there's nothing you can do against that except try to have your people happy. But in the context of COVID, it's more difficult.
Wow, that sounds like quite a chaotic time for you at the firm.
It's okay, but very exciting on the other hand. Okay, I mean, there's always some interesting things coming out of those chaotic times. But there was this very unhealthy elements of poaching talent around that I heard happened in many other places where small players were being raided all the time.
I'm glad we moved on from that period of time. I just wanted to quickly ask, actually, because Imperial has a huge population of life sciences students, and me myself included. I'm a biomedical engineer, and I'm just really curious, what do you see in the industry of healthcare going forward, and also in relation to where the UK and London is in the global scene of life sciences and healthcare?
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about the UK. What it has in favor is what I said, what makes the wider London area extremely attractive globally, with all the talent, the research, the universities, and more around that. And hopefully that will be secured, will not disappear. But yes, let's face it, there is a growing competition in China, for example, in the Middle East. Could we see a university in Qatar, or I don't know, or Saudi, or in Thailand becoming more famous than Oxford? I don't think so, but it's possible. So the UK will remain very attractive and will continue, in my view, to offer lots of opportunities. With a few buts. First, the Brexit, among other things, is a failure of Europe to build scale. That failure is not only related to the Brexit, but London had the opportunity to be the financial center of Europe. It is less so in the context of not belonging to the EU. And that means that, or that's part of the reason why there is no single unified market to raise lots of money for large ventures. Now, that's not the only reason. Okay, Europeans love regulation. The markets are not homogeneous, but we could have gone to have a London market competing with the US ones. Really, it was the case. It's less the case now. There are not too many examples of biotechs that can raise 500 million or $1 billion equivalent in Europe, whether in the UK or across continental Europe. So you have to go to the US. That's only one sign, but that's one of the big miseries and weaknesses of Europe and UK. If your question is about London being alone, single in the world, there's not much future for that. Okay, right. And drifting England physically to America is not going to. I mean, it will take a few billion years. So that doesn't work. The geographical proximity is Europe, not right. Australia, not Canada. So there are other things. The fact that the UK and the rest of Europe have lost a lot of their manufacturing capabilities. But with the robotization, things could change. They could well change. And that includes also virtual robotization with AI, etc. So let's face it, the biggest initiatives, they are not here. Okay, there are initiatives that are basically piggybacking what happens in the US.
Right.
There are a few initiatives. Okay, there's Mistral in France, there's one in Germany, I forgot the name, but they are like 5% of the size of the big American ones. And same when they raise money. So they can be agile, they can do fantastic things with less money, but there's little chance that they will dominate and lead. So UK, London, as part of Europe, still great opportunities in London and around, and Oxbridge, lots of opportunities in biotech, health tech. At one point, you need to go to the US, let's face it.
Right.
And how many, I mean, look at the pharma companies. GSK has missed, it seems, a little bit the coach for now, at least. They are much smaller than they used to be. AstraZeneca has done very well, actually. They moved, I published a case study with Imperial on Asceta Pharma acquisition by AstraZeneca. That's one of the main acquisitions in oncology that AstraZeneca did, and that transformed them and make them still a very relevant player, much more at the moment at least than GSK. So there are some companies. In medtech, there's not much in the UK. Health tech, we have seen what happened to Babylon, which was a fantastic idea, but probably took too much risk in the US. So you don't see a lot of world champions in the UK. Lots of innovation at the start, yeah, a lot of startup, but at one point being acquired or moving to the US. Right, so that was for products. For healthcare services, it's fascinating. The UK, with its model of NHS, is also the model that has the most, or one of the models with the most private players work with the NHS. Okay, so it's financed basically by the government with the NHS, and you work as a private operator with the NHS infrastructure and ecosystem. It's a very, very different organization that works well in some ways, but is very heavy to manage, as we see all the time. So that offers also opportunities, but it's a very, very distinct model. Sorry, I spoke a lot, but that's my area, right?
No, that was really insightful. And I just wanted to ask one more question relating to the forward-looking theme. For the next 5 to 10 years, are there any specific trends or concerns that you have, whether that's personal or like upon a global level, or more specifically something that impacts Candesic's work, like private equity firms?
Well, yes, I mean, any attempt to stop globalization is, in my view, creating lots of waste. Globalization is not just good. There are lots of bad things, but overall, it's more like a necessity, right? So we have to accept it. Now we are going back. And we could go back in many very, very bad ways. We could go back with, for example, the world dividing in 2 or 3 parts. Okay, so, I mean, that reminds us some old novels, but the world divided in 2, 3 parts, that means 2, 3 parts that spend their time fighting each other. So globalization is probably something that reduces the propensity of putting all your energy in fighting the others and rather trying to increase the size of the pie. Okay, so I'm not saying globalization is all good, but overall globalization is about increasing the size of the pie, and all the people who work against that, they are just being egoistic. Second thing is, of course, AI. My feeling is that we are kind of reaching the end of what we can achieve with LLMs, at least after the exponential progress we have seen in the last years.
Right.
Now, those tools are here to stay. Now we have quite intelligent tools that can help us in so many ways once we know how to prompt and how to manage them. And they will become even better, but perhaps not in the way we expected them to reach AGI or something like that. But we are now switching or moving to the next level, which is to incorporating real world experience. And billions, trillions of sensors will be everywhere, monitoring everything the weather, the speed, the temperature, whatever, but much more, including in your body, right? So everything ultimately might be just monitored in real time from everywhere, creating trillions, quadrillions of data points in real time that can be statistically mapped against each other and predict lots of things, at least in the short term. So what does that mean for the world? A completely different world, and that means certainly autonomous vehicles. That means probably free energy at one point, and free energy would come with free food, which would be fantastic. But that might take some time. The question, as my father said, is will still be around when it happens,
Right.
as humanity. So we have a very attractive future thanks to technology coming, and in terms of artificial intelligence, that will be the incorporation of the real world information with the statistical capabilities of LLMs, etc. Once you put the two together, it's amazing where we could go, and maybe we will have an artificial intelligence that is more clever than us. What this future will be, well, Elon Musk would recommend you to read Yen Bank's culture books, which predict a certain form of future for the humanity, which I hope would be the one that we will have, as opposed to Terminator. Yes. So that was the second point. The third one would be about healthcare specifically. Healthcare will continue to benefit from technological progress, has to. With not only we have, you know the problem that we face. It's mathematically it's very simple. We used to have people who were young and died early without even knowing they were sick. So that costs very little, right? We moved to a completely different universe where we live long, and the last years of our life we are more likely to develop comorbidities, and that costs way more. And on top of that, we expect rich people, old, to get very good care. So basically, we expect the system to pay 10 times more for us than it did 50 years ago, and 100 times than it did 200 years ago. And fine, this is our right to expect that, and hopefully we can expect it, if not demand it. But for that to work, we need to find new models of care with much more prevention and much more personalized medicine. So it's coming. Not everyone will benefit. Rich people will benefit first. There's a risk that only rich people will benefit. I'm not talking just about rich countries versus poor countries. Within rich countries, it's possible that only the richest of the richest will get all the benefit. So hopefully it's not going to be that way. That's why we have NHS in England, Social Security in Europe, etc. But we have a difficult period to go through with increasing waiting lines, with tough ethical decision to make when we have limited resources to take care of the people, we need to decide, do we give that to a baby who has a life to go, or to an old person who is not going to be a burden for very long? Tough ethical question, right? Most people would say to the baby, but it's even that is a problem. So whether you work in health policy or in developing new technologies or implementing them, or with an operator who is benefiting from all of that or has to struggle with all of that, you guys, STEM students who will join the healthcare industry, have plenty of work to do. Believe me, you will be very busy, and there will be lots of exciting careers for all of you. Lots of stress too, okay? And those systems, they could collapse.
Oh, let's hope that doesn't happen. Well, thank you so much for your time, Marc. I think we talked about some really interesting topics.
You didn't ask about my book.
I was gonna plug you right now, actually. Before we ended, you spoke to me about your textbook that you'll be releasing soon. If you wanted to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, just a quick word, not because I spent the last 2 years spending all my nights and weekend on it. So it's kind of, I feel like I have nothing to do. I can sleep an entire 7 hours sometimes. It's weird. So it's the first textbook on private equity in healthcare and life sciences. There are a few good textbooks on private equity. This one hopes to be even better just for private equity. So it's not, please consider it if you're interested in private equity, whether you're interested in healthcare or not, because it has everything you need to know in private equity. It uses my 20 years of teaching private equity. And I co-author it with Professor Gilles Chemla, who is an economist at Imperial College. So we show lots of things, but we also focus on healthcare on top. So it's both private equity and private equity or healthcare. And big book, published by Wiley Finance, but it's also about strategy and operations, and will be published in May.
Right. I will definitely be checking out that book. Sounds very relevant. Well, I just want to say thank you again. Hopefully after your textbook and this podcast as well, of course, that you'll be famous around campus and people will be coming up to you, recognizing you from the Imperial Investment Insights Podcast episode.
Yeah, and I'm just saying good luck to everyone who is studying STEM. I think you are doing the right thing, okay? It's so important to study STEM when you are young. I did not. I studied finance and I should have studied STEM instead. I mean, it's not a huge regret, but I realize that it's important to create this base of knowledge early.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Marc. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio today. And yeah.
Thank you both for having me. It's a pleasure, and I love to be in touch. I don't have a lot of time, but I love to follow what my students achieve in life.
Thank you.